Director Stone's going to be late, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Video's live.
And good morning, everyone. Welcome to our special committee of the whole meeting for December 9th. This is the meeting where we get the preliminary look at the budget overview for 2022 and take a look at some of the staff recommendations with respect to supplemental requests. And there's also an item on the agenda dealing with the damage to our parks and trails from the recent rainstorms. So that's the purpose of the meeting today. I'd like to begin by acknowledging that we're logged in and attending variously on the traditional and ancestral territories of a number of local First Nations, collectively comprising Coast Salish. And with that, I'd like to call the meeting to order, and we'll turn to Ms. Legault for a rundown of the agenda. Ms. Legault.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The first item of business is a motion to approve the agenda.
I see that moved and seconded. Any discussion, any late items for the agenda? Seeing none, all in favor? And opposed? That carries. Thank you very much. Ms. Legault.
We have no participants for public input period, so moving on down to reports. Item R1 is a report from the Finance Division with the review of the 2022 budget, and this is for information.
Thank you. It's my understanding that Ms. Bowen has a PowerPoint. Generally, and we haven't really done this at the regional district, but I even yesterday I noticed some people's videos were dropping out a little bit and there were some connection issues. We have found at North Cowichan that what works best with PowerPoints is if we all turn our videos off, with the exception of Ms. Bowen, because she's speaking, and that preserves bandwidth for the PowerPoint, and then we hold our questions until the end. Does that make sense to you, Ms. Bowen, in terms of holding the questions? All right. So let's do that. I'll turn the floor over to Ms. Bowen for the presentation. If we can turn our videos off, and we can all watch with rapt attention in terms of what's coming. Thank you. Go ahead, Ms. Bowen.
Good morning, everyone. I'd like to bring forward the 2022 Budget Overlook. So the CVRD has a population of approximately 83,000. We consist of 4 municipalities, 9 electoral areas, and have 178 services that we did budgets for.
Excuse me, I can't see the PowerPoint.
We're just working on getting the PowerPoint up. And Ms. Bowen, your video is not turned on. Can you turn your camera on?
How do I
that
do
unit?
Okay.
This is start video at the bottom. Ah, there comes the PowerPoint. Getting closer. There we go. All right. Go ahead, Ms. Bowen.
I lost my notes now. Okay, so we're on. There we go. So the majority of the budget consists of requisition. End of last year, the 2021 budget, the requisition was 40.5% of the total budget. The CVRD consists of a couple of different types of funding arrangements. We have regional services, which benefits the entire region and all areas participate in it. So an example of that would be the solid waste management sites. We have electoral area services, which is shared by all 9 electoral areas, and they pay into that. And an example of that is the Vancouver Island Regional Library. We have sub-regional services. Funding is by areas participating in that particular service. So an example of that is Kerry Park, where the South End pay into that area. Specified area services, and these services are set properties that do not make up an entire electoral area, but they pay into it, and an example of that would be for the fire halls. And I'll walk you through the different arrangements. So first we have regional services, and as you can see, like, it has all the different ones that everybody pays into. And then we have the proposed budget, and we have the actual budget of 2021. The next one is electoral area services. And again, these are for only people that pay into these ones. The municipalities do not pay into this area. An example, again, would be like community service or community planning, as only the electoral areas pay into that one. And on this slide, you'll see that there's a bunch of X's and O's. The X's represent that the entire electoral area services contributes to that service, where the O's represent that only a portion of the area contributes into that. Sub-regional, many of the services are sub-regional in nature, and that certain areas only pay into those. And again, you'll see that there's X's and O's on this one as well. And again, it's certain areas pay into them. The last one is the specified areas, and that these are where only certain properties pay into it. And again, you see like it's the fire departments, and then we only have O's on this one, no X's. Even though the taxation is a large portion of our budget, we do have other sources of funds. So we have parcel taxes, fees and charges, borrowing, grants, reserve fund, and surplus, where we have other money coming in. And some of the services that are funded by other than requisition are like the Community Health Network, the municipalities, the library board, which is MFA debt, curbside, garbage, recycling, sewer services, water services, and then some of our street lighting and some of our drainage systems. So the current budget approach. The current budget approach is an incremental in that the current activities and staffing levels are considered core and used as a baseline for the upcoming budget. The approach used the core as a basis of the preparation for the budget, and requests for changes to current service levels are treated as supplemental requests. Core expenditures as defined as those required to maintain current staffing, service levels, and capital, where supplemental requests for the purpose of budgeting are defined as items addition to current staffing levels and service levels, and that require increases to requisition or service fees. The 2022 budget mandate was a 3%, and staff worked really hard to stay within that mandate. So since the date that the report was done, there was a report. The total requisition increase has changed from a 2.63 down to 2.4, as some of the budgets are still being completed. So as you can see, the requisition increase is a 2.4. Supplemental requests have an increase of 4.8 to requisition. If core and all supplementals were to be approved today, requisition increase would be a 6.48. So increase to requisition is described as the total number, and effects on individual properties varies as based on the number of factors, including assessment and where the property is. Only the participants in the service area contribute to the cost of providing the service. So this slide shows the effect on each municipality and electoral area for the proposed 2022 budget. The next three slides are dealing with the calendar. So these are the ones that we've completed. We had, the board gave us direction, and then we did our allocation budgets that were completed in June. The budgets for each functions were created and completed in October. Supplemental requests were reviewed by the senior management in November, and the budget was prepared on a core basis. So the next two slides are stuff that's coming up with our timeline. So we will be sending and going to different committees and meetings and commissions to present the budget. In February, we're hoping that we will have the review of the final budget, and in March, we will be adopting the budget in the 5-year plan. So now this next sections deal with the actual budget book, and we're updating the website, so by the end of today, it will all be updated with all the slides. So now I'm going to walk you through the different slides that can be found on our website. So Schedule A is the first one, and Schedule A details changes in the requisition. So it starts with last year's, takes into consideration the library, and then, because we do not have control over that one, And then followed by the list of changes to the requisition to the individual services. And then the total. So the change this year is at the very bottom, which was, I don't know if you can see, it's very tiny, is 989 and 002. So that's the change from 2001 to 2002. Schedule B shows the change by area. It shows the change per 100,000 worth of assessment. The draft 2022 budget currently uses a 2021 revised asset roll as assessment roll, as the 2022 roll has not yet been released. So that's why it's a little different. Schedule C looks at the total requisition by area since 2014. The draft budget includes a proposed increase of 2.4, and this does not include any supplemental requests, so this is just based on core. Schedule D is has a page for each jurisdiction, so there'll be all of them on the website. It details the services in each area, the cost per 100,000 of assessment for each service, and the tax rate. It also shows the services that are only a portion of that area. So down at the bottom, as you can see in Area A, only properties that participate in Sentinel Ridge are the ones that will be charged for that, and that's at the bottom. Schedule E shows the impact of each service on the average home. Again, there's a page for each jurisdiction, and the value of the average home is listed at the top of the screen. Schedule F is a detailed listing of the debt. As we're still in 2021, haven't finished, this is not updated yet, so it shows the debt as of December 31st, 2020. As we complete year end, we will be updating this and up to the website once we have the actual numbers. The next slide is to deal with capital reserves. And staff are currently reviewing capital expenditures for the 2021 and making sure that all the transactions related to funding are recorded in the accounting records. So again, this one is showing at the end of December 2020. Will be updated once we have completed our year end for 2021. The next one is operating reserves. And again, it's the same thing. We will be updating this one once year end has been completed. And we will update for the commitments for the 2022 budget. Schedule H deals with the assessment value of the property by jurisdiction for the last few years. And as I mentioned previously, the 2022 assessment roll is not released until December 31st, so we're using the 2021 values. Schedule I shows how the requisition for each area is broken down among the different property classes in the area. So in Area A, the total requisition there is at 85.85% of the total. Schedule J shows a summary of residential costs per 100,000 of assessment and shows how much of the total assessment in each of the electoral areas in the municipalities. For instance, in Area B, down on the bottom, has a 22% of electoral area assessment and 11 assessment of the entire for the municipalities. Schedule K is a history of the parcel taxes, and there's a section you'll see for water and one for sewer, and this just deals with them. And Schedule L is the actual user fees for the water and sewer systems. And also at the bottom we'll have a tab for each function so that you can go in to see. So when you click on that function, you will see that there's schedules. So the first schedule you'll come across is the summary. It gives a detail of what the function is. Then it lists the total requisition and notes if there is a statutory limitation, which is in the middle section, using the listing of all the participants, the converted assessment in the area. So that's down at the bottom will show who all pays into that certain area. And then at the very bottom, it has the residential tax rate per 100,000 or per 1,000, and then it has it per 100,000. Then that's at the very bottom of each summary sheet. Next, after that one will be a 5-year plan. We always add in the previous year for comparison, and then we have the next 5 years to be able to see what's happening. And this is at a very high level. It's not a detailed. And the last part on each of these is the detailed listing from from our accounting system, which is known as VATM. And then we just list it for each one so you can see what's going on with them. And that is the presentation.
Thank you very much, Ms. Bowen. If we can take the PowerPoint down and folks can turn their video back on, we can sort of start the discussion in terms of questions. Director Nicholson to start.
Thank you. I really appreciate the presentation. I am so impressed at how the information in our budget package has improved over time, and I really like seeing the operating reserves and capital reserves on a schedule. My question is, I don't understand the parcel tax. When is parcel tax used and what is it for?
So parcel tax is a parcel tax on each piece of property, and it is done through engineering, and it is used for capital in nature, like is usually what the parcel tax is for.
So do you mean that, so it does apply to particular services related to capital, or?
Through the chair. Through the chair to Director Nicholson. Parcel taxes are in the establishing bylaw. It sets the rates that are established, and it was identified if it was a requisition or if it was a parcel tax. And it's a flat tax that's on a per parcel of land. It's usually land and goes by frontage for or assessment. It can go either way. For water or sewer services. It can be set up in some services. They may choose that the parcel tax is utilized for capital and user fees are for operating costs. Other ones, it's a combination of both and can determine each one of the different parcel taxes can be established a different way. They also have a limit of what the parcel tax can be, just like you would have with a requisition.
So can I have a follow-up? Do we ever review whether there should be changes or improvements to how we do that?
Through the chair to Director Nicholson, that is something that is done by the engineering department, as they are the ones that establish the rates for the water and sewer services.
Thank you.
Okay, I've got Director Salmon.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you, Ms. Bowen, for that presentation. Just a big picture question. I noticed, so about the impact of new construction, I noticed when we did the hospital budget yesterday that we did a 3% requisition increase, but when you factored in new construction, many properties would actually have a decrease in property tax. So I'm wondering how that might apply. You know, I see here we approved everything, all the supplementals would be at 6-point-something%. Can we assume there'd be a impact of new construction? We'd be down significantly on the actual property taxes?
Through the chair to Director Salmon, new construction definitely comes into play, and it depends on different areas. With regional districts, it's a little bit different because, especially when it comes to services, because not all services contribute. And so one area may see a lot of new construction, another one may not, and it sort of shifts the pot. So the amount is collected and goes down for some areas, but not the other, say if you didn't have new construction. But overall, what I've been seeing over the last, I think there's been a couple of assessments done on it, and the rates have maintained, even though there's been increases for some properties based on new construction, that they've had high developments in their areas.
Okay, not sure I totally understood that. So in some areas, new construction will have a decrease or not a decrease, but a less of an increase.
Yeah, through the chair to Director Salmon. Yeah, it depends on the area. As developments happen, they're not always guaranteed. Like there may not be as many developments, say in Lake Cowichan, as there is in Shawnigan. And based on that, you can't say across the board that there would be less of an impact for the taxpayer because of the area they're in.
Okay, so anyway, thank you. That was, but it was, I thought it was quite interesting to see the effect a hospital actually sets across all the region. That would be an actual potential decrease in property tax for the hospital assessment. Thank you.
Director Wilson, and then Marsh.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks for that, Ms. Bowen. That's really good. Can you tell me, with new construction, and let's take industrial, I know there are a couple of new places going up in Cobble Hill. When do they actually start paying their taxes? Do they start paying from the time they start the construction or from the time that they actually start their business up?
Through the chair to Director Wilson, when it comes to assessment, it's when the BC assessment assesses the property. And the assessments are usually done in the summer, so it's usually completed by about August, and that impacts. So they have completed most of the assessments for the 2022 assessments, which we'll be receiving in December. So depending on the level and what stage that construction is at is based on that value that will be into the taxation year. It's not when the operation starts.
Director Marsh.
Thank you, through you to Ms. Weiner. Sorry, I got a bit of a frog in the morning. Is the reason the hospital tax going down, are we going to be not now requisitioning that, I think it's 10 million at this point a year towards the hospital, or?
Ms. Weiner.
Through the chair to Director Marsh, yes, we'll be still requiring the $10 million to make the debt payments over the next few years. There's also other projects that are coming forward. I think there's a $2.5 million project scheduled in 2022 for Ladysmith that will be coming forward. So while the hospital has got the 10 million required for the debt payments, there will be other projects at the other facilities that'll need to be done.
Okay, and one more if I could.
Go ahead.
So the parcel taxes for water and sewer, does the regional district put aside, charge a little bit more so they're building a bit of a reserve as the cost of those functions go up? Is the first question. And the second one is, are there still some orphaned septic systems that we expect will have to be taken over? And is there a reserve being set aside for those parcels?
Ms. Weiner.
Okay. Through the chair to Director Marsh, with regards to the first question, that would be engineering that would be doing the review of those taxes, and if there was enough going into reserves, you never know, there's unforeseen circumstances that can arise. If there is a surplus every year in the budget, it gets carried into an operating reserve until they hit the 4-month maximum, and then if there's more, it goes over to the capital reserve. With regards to abandoned services, a service would need to be established for anything that's added to the system that's not currently there. So that would be a whole different process of an establishing bylaw.
So that would mean for regional district residents, if suddenly they needed a sewer to go in because their septic's failed, it's a big one-time cost, like it would be if they paid for a new septic system kind of thing.
That would probably be a better question for the engineering department on the process on that. Finance takes care of working out the calculations to ensure that we do the budget correctly and put the money aside for the capital required.
Okay. I see Mr. Boyson popped up. I don't know if he wanted to address it or.
Mr. Boyson.
Yeah, thank you, through the chair. So I guess I could provide some more information at future meetings if there's some specific questions around engineering as the interim GM. But I know that the condition of some of these different systems that get proposed to us can be in different states. It can really depend. And so our engineering team and water team looks at what the condition of it is and then brings that forward as what the potential risks are. Some of the systems can vary greatly, as my understanding, what we've seen over the years. So we assess those and determine which ones in the number of orphan systems that are out there that could be coming our way. I don't have a sense of that. I'm sure Mr. Dennison has some idea of that. So it's something I can look into for our future follow-up meetings.
Thank you, Mr. Boyson.
Director McGonigal.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. First of all, thank you for the presentation. Very informative and easy to follow along. And I agree with Director Nicholson on how far this has come forward in the process of the budget discussions as we move along. Kudos to everyone in the regional district departments that have brought us in at 2.4% in the core budgets. The difficult part will be the supplementals, and I anticipate some discussion within that. But we've heard numerous times from our CAO and various members that we're heavily understaffed, and we as a board continue to disregard that request for supplemental members to join the team. So I think it's coming back as a cumulative process where some of those needs are more transparent this year than ever. And I look forward to a good discussion on some of the supplementals. Thank you again.
Thank you, Director McGonigal. I have a question as well. I'm not seeing any other hands there, so. Oh, I see you. Sorry, Ian. Just to Schedule H, where you looked at the total assessments, full value and converted value, and those numbers are considerably different. Refresh my memory. What's converted? What does that distinction actually mean?
To the chair, the converted value, well, business class is 2.5 times the residential rate.
Oh, it's the...
And the industrial is 4 times. Right. That is, when you multiply it out, that gives you the converted rate.
Okay, thank you. Good. Director Morrison, sorry I didn't see you earlier. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I've got a couple of questions, but I want to start with maybe the area that was just being discussed there, the impacts of assessment. I've got a preliminary indication that even though I've got a really low number based on the draft that we have now, that looks like Class 7 forestry is going to be clobbered in my area again. So, well, I might show a reduced requisition as compared to last year. I'm going to be in trouble again this year with a big number for the impact on residential class. So I'm just curious to know if staff have heard any indications as to what impacts there might be on assessment, or are they just flying blind like the rest of us until we get the new numbers? And I have a follow-up after that.
Ms. Weiner?
Through the chair to Director Morrison, yeah, the only information that's been received by finance is that some notices were going out earlier to send them out saying that their properties were being much higher assessed than normally would be. And that's, once we get into, I think the first week of January, we'll have those first preliminary looks at what those assessment numbers are.
But was there any indication of a particular class that was going to be hammered harder than others in that circular from BC Assessment?
No, to date, finance staff have not received anything on any particular area.
Sorry. Director Morrison, go ahead.
So thank you. Just I sort of got a two-parter here in reference to what Director McGonigal had mentioned. There's the way the supplementals are laid out. It appears that staff are preparing us to be looking at potential staff hires. And it looks like it's contingent on what some of the prior supplementals that are put before us, whether or not they're approved or not. So basically, if we create the demand by approving various projects and initiatives, then that demand will have to be fulfilled by a staff hire, and those are listed at the bottom. So I'm just maybe suggesting to everyone that there's a list of hires, and I'm trying to, because it's an election year, I'm trying to ensure that after my 9.5% hit the residential property taxpayers last year, I'm trying to keep things in check to a certain extent. But my second question is I'm feeling going into this exercise today that I've got one hand tied behind my back because not able to access the budget. So I'm surprised that we didn't get access to a draft budget before we started this exercise. That's the way I normally prepare for a budget discussion. So when will it become available to us? And yeah, I'll leave it there.
Ms. Weiner?
Through the chair to Director Morrison, it is being, we wanted to do the budget overview, give the board before it went out to the public. That's part of the reason why it was held off until this morning. We were just giving the information of what's available on the website, and later today it will be up on the website for everybody. As this was just for an information session, the deliberations will be part of the January meetings.
Any other questions, Director Morrison? Okay, anybody else? Director Wilson?
Yeah, just is it too early to ask questions on the supplementals at the moment, Ms. Weiner?
That's the next budget.
Okay,
Agenda
I'll come
item.
up. I'll wait until then. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so are we done with this point on the agenda? I mean, it's there for information, and I think we've all received some fulsome information, so thank you all very much. That moves us to item R2, which is a report from the acting CAO with respect to the supplemental budget requests. And I'm assuming, oh, there she is. I'm looking for Ms. Mohan, and she just
We
popped
just
up
lost
on screen.
audio from the chair.
I'm sorry? Hello? Hello? Oh, okay, good. I don't know what happened. I turned my mic on, but somebody else turned me off. I'm not sure how much you heard, but we're done with R1, so we move to R2, which is the report from our acting CAO with respect to the supplemental budget requests. That was included in your package, and Ms. Mohan, I don't believe you got a PowerPoint. You're just going to give us a verbal, right? Okay. I'll turn the floor over to Ms. Mohan. Go ahead.
Through the chair to the board, I'm here to talk to you today about the supplemental package. And so just a little bit about the process and maybe how it differed a little bit from prior years. Normally we get sort of a flood of different supplemental requests, and then we go through kind of a qualification process at the senior management table to highlight what the priorities are. And increasingly over the years, we're finding that the supplementals that we end up deciding our priorities more and more land in the category of strategic priorities or asset replacement, so asset management, which is really, if you go back to the slide that Ms. Bowen presented around, how the budget is formed, they're actually really should be considered part of core. Maintaining our assets is one of our core functions, and our strategic priorities are part of our core services. So even though these are supplemental requests, I would encourage you to understand that there's a large number of them this year, and the majority of them are because we need to replace assets and we need to be able to move forward on strategic priorities identified by the board. So the supplemental requests have been grouped. They've been grouped in terms of strategic plan items, in terms of asset management items, and then other items. And sort of the other items are often the support services that support the work of the asset management and strategic plan items. And then as Director Morrison has pointed out, because there are a number of, there are a high number of items, if all of the supplementals were to be approved, or the majority were to be approved, senior management took a look at how would that impact our capacity, and would we need to make additional hires to be able to confidently say that we could accomplish those supplemental work plan items within the 2022 calendar year. And so there's a list of staffing requests at the bottom that are directly tied to the approval of the bulk of the supplementals. And so of course, as the board deliberates on the supplementals and the degree or the nature of which ones get approved, that list might change, and senior management might have to update you on what's required to support the supplementals from a staffing perspective. There are some staffing requests in there that are not directly related to the volume of supplementals. They are staffing requests related to provision of services because we are finding ourselves understaffed, and that's more towards the comments that Director McGonigal made. And so we've separated those out. So we have also separated out the community works funding so that you can see them on their own in terms of the community works fund projects that are specific to electoral areas. The staffing supplemental, the supplementals related to additional, the staffing requests related to the supplementals include provision for accomplishing the area parks community works funds projects. And then finally, I'd like to just point out that the next report on our agenda is from the Parks and Trails Division regarding the damage that was done to our parks in the recent rainfall events. And having looked at that report, I can see that we actually don't have all the information from those assessments done yet, and those will be following probably in January with an additional supplemental for you to consider. So just given the timing, there was no way of providing that information to you in full today. And so that's my report for you, my summary of the report. Of course, I imagine there'll be lots of questions about the supplementals. I may be able to answer some of them myself, but we do have senior staff here and other staff here to answer any questions about the supplemental.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. I've got Director Wilson, Morrison, and Smith on the list so far. Director Wilson.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Ms. Mohan. With the, you just mentioned, and I'm looking at the kind of small print here on attachment A, Cobble Hill Village Sewer, and I'm going across there, and it says 230,000 from other. Is that what you were referring to as far as the CWF? Is that the other in there?
No, I don't believe so. I believe that if you're talking about Cobble Hill Village Sewer Function 812.
Yeah.
Okay, so no, that's not one of the area community parks community works funds projects. It's considered a top priority asset management item.
Okay, so it's not coming under this is where I'm getting a bit confused because I'm not very good at accounting. There's not coming out of requisition. It's not coming out of parcel tax or capital reserve or surplus. It's coming out of other. What is other? That's where I'm a little bit concerned.
That would be a question for engineering, or it may identify it on the individual supplemental, to which we will eventually, if you don't already, will have access so that it will identify it. But if another senior staff member could point out where the $230,000 is being funded from, that would be appreciated.
Anybody?
Popped up. Go ahead.
Thank you, through the chair. So I could take a quick look now through our meeting here to get an answer to you. I just have to confirm as I'm going through my files here too as well. So
okay, good.
I can look that up for you quickly.
Lovely. And I've got one more, I think, on, if I may, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, go ahead.
Mr.
Boyce is looking at the other one, so go ahead.
Sure. Staffing requirements under human resources consultant. Operating $791,000. What's that all about?
Ms. Mohan.
Page 2 of attachment A.
Sorry, yeah, 791,000 seems like a high number. I believe that the cost of hiring additional human resources consultant, one full-time employee, would be the $152,798 associated with the requisition increase.
Yeah, I'm still a bit confused. So what's $791,000 doing there? I don't. It's a lot of money, and a consultant. I'm just wondering, is this a consultant that has been brought into human resources to help out while you're doing the CEO's acting, or is this a new position?
This is a new position. So within the human resources division, our senior recruitment staff are called consultants, HR consultants. So we have 3 right now. And so this additional consultant request would be to support hiring, and the hiring that person would be engaged in is the hiring of the other staffing that's required for supporting the supplemental request, right? So if you add up the number of people we would need to add in order to, and sort of the concomitant costs of training and onboarding, et cetera, all of those things, if you add all of that together for what's required to support the supplemental request, it necessitates the hire of an additional human resources person in the department to make that happen.
Okay, I still don't get where the 791,000 comes from. I'm sorry, I'm being a bit slow here, but you know,
No, that's all right. I think let's ask Ms. Weiner if she can perhaps answer that.
Ms. Weiner's got her hand up. Go ahead.
Through the chair to Director Wilson, the supplementals that come in are for 5 years. They're based on, so there's a 5-year operating cost. So the $791 are for the 5 years. And so that would be wages, benefits, training, all of that. That's the fully loaded package.
Okay. But okay, if it's for 5 years, why are we putting the full amount for 2022? Again, bear with me here. I'm not that smart. I would have thought if it's for 2022, then you would only have the 1 year cost, not the full 5-year cost, and then each year you roll it in. Am I wires crossed here?
Ms. Weiner?
Through the chair to Director Wilson, this is so the board can make informed decisions of what the impact is for the decisions for the whole 5 years. That's why the requisition was 152,000, because that's for the single year. But when you see the supplementals as they've come forward, they'll have all 5 years. And so sometimes decisions that are made in year one, say 2022, will have an impact on the next 4 years. And so this gives you the information and the total cost for the next 5 years.
Okay, I'm not totally clear on that, but yeah, again, I'm belaboring a point here. Anything that comes forward as a supplemental for 2022, you're including 5 years of costs there, and it just bumps everything up. And I understand that, yeah, you would have a 5-year figure. This is what it's going to cost over the next 5 years, but in 2022, it's going to cost us 152,000. I still, all right, I'm confused here, but let's have a chat about it later on, because I don't want to take up too much time here. I just don't understand that one.
Ms. Weiner, did you want to respond briefly or not?
Through the chair to Director Wilson, that column is called total project cost. So that is considered for the whole 5 years. It's not just a 2022 column line, it's a total project cost. So that you may find with supplementals, you'll have 3-year projects, 2-year projects, 1-year projects. So this is to give the whole total project cost, not just 2022.
All right, thank you. I've got, let's see, Morrison, Smith, Acton, Stone, and Marsh on the list so far. Director Morrison.
So a couple of things, but I was just seeking clarification. If I've already noticed something in here that I'd like to change for when we get to the next stage of this, can I bring it forward today? It's a fairly simple thing. I've already checked with staff. What's our procedure on that?
I would prefer, I mean, this entire presentation today is for information. We'll have lots of opportunity for amendments later. I would strongly recommend that we hold our fire on making any amendments right now until everybody has a fulsome understanding of the full picture. But certainly put that thing in your back pocket, and when we come back to discuss this at the meeting in January, we'll just keep that in mind, and you'll be at the top of the list, and that can be one of the first changes, because you're fresh out of the gate. That would just be I don't know what the rest of the board feels, but today is an information session rather than a decision session, I would think. I don't know.
I'll go through staff and get that done elsewhere or another way. But my question is for, I guess, Ms. Mohan or Ms. Weiner. We've got a lot of asset management stuff in here, and yeah, I've been following this for 10 years, since the initial asset management BC presentations at UBCM, and I haven't been following it that closely, but closely enough to know that a lot of jurisdictions are packaging all of their asset management materials into a class as an initiative to say, okay, public, there's this new thing called asset management that we're all doing. And I know that we've been doing it to some extent, but it's been packaged and marketed in such a way that we're doing something new and different that hasn't been done before. Now it appears that we're moving forward on a strategy of just rolling everything into our one budget package. And I don't know that if you were to ask a member of the public, how they think we're doing on asset management, that they would have a clue what we're talking about. So is there any potential for us to segregate out those things that are strictly asset management, so that we can go to the public and say, this is a newer concept that local governments are doing to ensure that our assets are functional and viable into the future. And there's a big number that's attached to it for this year because we're just launching the program or something like that. Do you understand where I'm going with this, Ms. Mohan?
Ms. Mohan.
Through the chair to Director Morrison, I do understand where you're going. I think that there's a couple of different things happening simultaneously, and I'm going to make a couple of comments and then give Ms. Weiner and Mr. Boyson a chance to respond if I've left anything out. But right now, we're just in the midst of rolling out a more fulsome asset management program, right, which began years ago with condition-based assessment. Some of our condition-based assessments are having to be replenished at this time because already enough time has passed. There's a significant investment in some asset management software that's happening. And so our program is evolving and developing and growing. Right now, we are at this place in time where this is the way we can make it visible to the public and show what the impact is, and also make sure that the board is aware of that impact. I do believe that there was a request for an update to the asset management program, the progress on it from Director Smith. I can see you nodding. And I do believe that staff are preparing to bring that to the board. And perhaps that's an opportunity to talk a little bit more about the public education side of rolling out an asset management program. With respect to packaging it in a way, I think there may be some concerns in terms of how regional district finances are structured about whether or not that's accurate or misleading to the public, depending on how it's presented. And that's kind of where I would count on Ms. Weiner's advice in terms of how to best represent the spending that's associated with our asset management program. So I'll leave it at that, and then I'll defer to Mr. Boyson and Ms. Weiner if they have anything to add.
Ms. Weiner, anything to add on this one?
Through the chair. Sorry, I'm learning. Yeah, finance is looking at various ways. Once the implementation of the software goes through, there's more aspects than just the capital replacement. There's also the maintenance that will need to be tracked, and both of those systems will need to be brought into the finance. We're looking and bringing things. Currently, our supplementals do have a ranking system that says if it attaches to asset management. So as you go through the budget process, if you look in the corner of the sheet for the supplemental, it will say if it's an asset management project.
Mr. Boyson, anything to add? I see you've popped up as well.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'd just like to add, I feel like it stands out in this budget how much assets are really focused on as a part of the discussion, and I think it's time for also an update for the board in January as well. So I'd like to be able to do that with Mr. Tokarek, who's been doing that work for us in the implementation, and really lay out the big picture about how it ties into the budget. I think would be valuable as well. So I want to add that I think it'd be good for the board as we're going through the budget process here to get an oversight and an update as to where we're at with asset management as well.
While your screen is on, do you have an answer to the question that Director Wilson asked earlier? You were going to pop out and take a look. I can't even remember what the question was, so refresh our memories.
I do. Yeah, luckily I had engineering staff help me out with this one just to confirm it. So that one was listed under the fees. It's actually through connection fees, and it's for that particular project. It's a connection that the developer will be paying the connection fee for. So that's why it's listed under other. So it's a one-time connection fee.
Does that satisfy you, Director Wilson?
Kind of. I'll talk to engineering again about it later on, because I think I gave them about $300,000 or $400,000 for in CWF for some other infrastructure. So if the developer is paying these fees, why are we listing it as part of our money to pay? I just don't understand. I'll talk to engineering anyway.
Okay, thank
you.
We
can confirm that for you, Director Wilson, for sure. Yeah.
All right. Director Morrison, we were on to you. I didn't mean to interrupt. It just seemed like an appropriate time to have that question answered. Do you have anything further?
Fair enough. I just want to drive the point home that I'm really hoping that we will have a communications and backup of the asset management perspective that I spoke of to go to the public this year. I think it's very important, and I anticipate hearing staff come forward with something innovative in January. Thank you.
And I agree with you. I mean, as a general principle, I know it comes up in my municipal context, and I try to explain to people that, You know, we used to be able to get grants for some of this stuff from senior governments, but senior governments have now said, we're not going to give you grants unless you're going to show us how you're going to replace this asset when it wears out in 50 years, and that's asset management. And that's why we build reserve funds, and, you know, and when you put it to people that way, they kind of understand. They don't like it, but they understand that there's costs associated. Director Smith, you're next.
Thank you. I appreciate the conversation on asset management. Through the chair to staff, one of the things that, with regards to asset management, a lot of the conditional assessments were done in 2017. And during that time, we haven't seen a long-term financial plans for those assets. And I'm hoping that in January that there will be that included. Bringing all these supplementals forward are interesting, but where do they fit into that long-term financial plan and the sustainability of working towards the asset, retaining it, upgrading it? And those are very important parts of the understanding for the community if they're looking at supplementals and it's just a popped-in amount and the background regarding it. So I'm really hoping that, the electoral areas, we agreed to put in $1 million into asset management from our community works funds that were electoral area funds. And, that's a fair chunk of money that was put in, and we would like to most likely see where we're going, especially with electoral areas and that money. I have a question regarding the supplemental also. Are we going to have a breakdown of each one of these supplementals so that we can see them in a much fuller description and information? These are so tiny. The information is sort of lacking and it's quite hard to follow. So this is for information today, I understand. Will we have a full breakdown? In the past, when we've seen the supplementals, they came forward with each one having its own page, its own information that was broken down with a description. And will we receive that later, and that we're just receiving this for information?
Ms. Weiner?
Thank you.
I see you, Director Acton. Ms. Weiner, or perhaps our acting CAO. I'm not sure who wants to respond to that question.
I'll leave this question to Ms. Weiner.
Through the chair to Director Smith, yes, that will be part of the packages as we go through to each committee. We'll be bringing forward the budgets with the supplemental forms that is the one-page forms that you've seen in the past.
All right, Director Acton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I'm sorry, I don't think Director Smith wasn't finished. I'm sorry, I should have asked Lynn. Go ahead.
Excuse me, I just wanted to check in with Mr. Boyson in regards to whether they will have the long-term financial plans for asset management for coming forward with the information in January. Thank you.
Mr. Boyson.
Thank you. Through the chair. So we won't have all the financial planning completed yet. It's a long process, this assets management work. Our condition assessments, you'll see that are part of the supplementals, are being integrated to get that information updated this year, which is great timing with our implementation of the software. How that fits into long-term financial planning, that's a part of what's going on this year and the next year as well. So to say that right now the information that we have is helping us to make some of the long-term decisions and looking at where our high priority items are. Like primarily this is all about us being able to prioritize where we can best spend these dollars and how to efficiently use these funds. And we're going to get better at it as time goes on. We won't have that full financial picture in January, pardon me, but Ms. Maynard and her team and on the finance department, they're a part of this asset management project as we move forward. So we won't have a full financial picture yet. It's too early to promise that, but I think that the information that we're receiving through the development of the system, and once the system is in place, we'll be able to have a better picture of how to make better decisions for future budget years. So I'll just have to leave it at that for now.
Thank you, Mr. Boyson. Director Smith, are you done? Okay, good. I've got Acton, Stone, and Marsh on the list. Director Acton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This process feels slightly different from the past in the sense where it feels a little backwards. Setting budgets is one of our most important roles as a director, and I'm feeling like, even for myself, I agree with Director Smith, a lack of information or lack of a business case coming forward for some of these items. Looking at general government, I always understood that we would look at the budgets before we would set out a preliminary budget to the public, where I don't understand. I would like to know, why is it almost 18% higher than last year? And then looking at the supplementals, I see some of it broken down, but it shows up as just small percentage increases. So it doesn't actually inform me in any way. And that budget is one of our largest budgets. So I'm not that interested in splitting hairs on these tiny budgets that seem to roll over consistently every year. But when something like that happens, I'd like to be able to understand, and I feel like I've missed something. I understood that whenever it's above 3%, we would have a business case presented to us, and that would be for discussion. So can we talk about some of this general government and how it breaks down?
Are you talking staffing requirements if majority of supplementals are approved under the sort of last bullet on, I believe it's page 2 of the supplemental report, where there's...
Yeah, so looking at page 2, there's quite a few different, there's different areas where general government is listed. And then there's a percentage increase, which is fine, but it doesn't tell me a lot. If someone says to me, well, why is general government so high this year? I'd like to have the kind of overview of what's being budgeted in that function.
Ms. Mohan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through to Director Acton. I do think it's frustrating. Like, you get the information, and we can't always, due to timing, present all of the background immediately at the same time as we're presenting you with the summary. So I appreciate the frustration, but I think there is built into the budget calendar ample time, both to receive the detailed information that you need to be able to answer the public, and also to inform your questions to staff, and also to make changes, and then ultimately, decide on which supplementals that you're willing to approve. So I would I'd ask for a little bit of patience, and I would just try to reassure you that all of that information is there, and you will get to see it and deliberate on it before you have to make any decisions about the budget.
I would just, not to paraphrase Ms. Acton, but I kind of hear what she's saying, because we're going to put this on the website later today, and we have certain folks in community who watch this fairly closely, and they'll be setting their hair on fire in terms of some of these increases in general government. And there goes the CVRD again, and we as the elected leadership don't really have a rationale that we can say, yeah, but, right, because we haven't been presented that yet. And it's a process piece, but it does seem a little different this year than past years. Director Acton, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I appreciate the response. I didn't actually have a follow-up, but I just, when we set the budget and we started the budget process, I was not aware that this would be the rollout of the budget. It does seem completely different from the past, whereas we're completely hands off of any of the development of the budget, and now it will be presented to the public as almost factual, and whether we get a response or not, I don't think that matters, but it just feels like, we're not part of the process, and I would like to be able to understand some of those bigger budgets. before it's shared online.
Director Stone, then Marsh. Haven't seen any other hands. Oh, Dr. Toporowski and Nicholson. Go ahead, Director Stone.
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate all that I've heard. Just when I put my hand up, it was actually to respond to Director Wilson that this is in the context of a 5-year financial plan, and the total cost of those employees is over that 5-year window of a financial plan, with the annual implications being detailed in the 2022 year. And as far as the conversation around posting the general overview and then diving deep into it, I don't seem to think it was that much different than past years, where we get a high level overview and then staff come back in January with the business cases to justify the requests for those supplementals as was directed by the board. So my understanding, just looking at this, was this is the FYI overview. Staff will come back in January. And for those who ask, I say, this is just the draft that staff has put forward for requests. And we will deliberate on those through the rest of the budget process. So I don't think we even need to get into too much justification with folks, because at this point the board has given no direction on these. These are staff's requests in their priority placing exercise. The final part of it is just understanding at first, of course, if anybody gets sticker shock about this preliminary presentation, it was Ladysmith at 4.6% core increase. But being able to, again, explain to people how service participation works. And for the last, several years, Ladysmith has had a larger percentage increase than other areas, but only because of the services that are being impacted are those that Ladysmith participates in, like solid waste, like transit. And we've been supportive of those changes, and recognizing that the dollar impacts are maybe somewhat less, even though a percentage increase may be higher. So in contrast to some of the other members, I want to say I think this overview gives us a good place to start. Zero in on what we want to pay special attention to when that more detailed information comes available for each service, and then be able to dive into what supplementals or what refinement of the core budget may need to be done to deliver what the board wants for the community over the next budget year. So yeah, I just I feel like after 7 years or 7 budgets now that we've done, we've jiggled it, and shook things around and put things in different orders, but the outcome is always the same. Before any decisions are made for the board, we get details on those increases that staff are proposing on those, especially on those supplementals. And as we've seen in the past, the board can make those necessary decisions as we move through the process. And at this point, the explanation that I have to community is that this is preliminary, and we'll get a chance to actually go into the service by service requests in January.
Thank you, Director Stone. I've got Marsh, Toporowski, Nicholson, and Kuhn. Director Marsh.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Director Stone covered most of what I was going to say, so I think I'm just going to share my viewpoint on an election year and how you set budgets. So I'll give the analogy that if the CVRD was a house and we were the caretakers of that house and we were charged to make sure that everything was in working order, we wouldn't leave some really important things undone for the next caretakers to have to look after. We would be responsible. And I would kind of point out that this is what happens at times when people say, well, we only want a 2% increase, or we only wanted this. And I mean, of course, we can give direction. Yet, I mean, just go home to your very own house and do your budgeting for how much your costs have increased in these last 2 years. So it's life. And if previous boards had understood or, had the direction about if you want a grant, you're going to have an asset management plan, we probably wouldn't be in this state. But if we keep punting it forward, someone's going to pay the bill, and sadly, it's going to make housing less affordable for young people to either rent or buy. So you have to kind of keep spreading it out incrementally. And, this isn't a popularity contest, is all I would like to say. It's did you keep the values that our community, the needs that our community have, did you look after them properly? And they cost what they cost. You only have to look across any other budgeting table in the province, and everyone's facing the same thing. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Marsh. Toporowski, Nicholson, Kuhn. Director Toporowski.
Thank you, Chair. Just to the point of the total 5-year project, I didn't know if there could be a star put on beside that item for HR and a note at the bottom just explaining that. I don't know. But I think that would help in looking at that huge number, or I don't know, having it at the top. It's just my suggestion. Thank you.
All right, because it does say at the top of the column, total project cost. So maybe that can we can do a little bit more explanation of what that means, that it's not a 1-year piece. Director Nicholson.
Thank you. I apologize. I appear to be in the middle of an exercise class right now. And I really appreciate on the addition of the information about the implications to staffing. Well, I don't see any implications at the bottom of Schedule B, which is about the basically about all the gas tax projects. And I know we've had trouble getting them completed to date, and I'm just wondering if maybe there should be some thought about staffing implications for those. Thank you.
Anybody on staff want to respond to that? Ms. Mohan?
Sorry, I lost my cursor there. Through the chair to Director Nicholson, there are a number of staff positions listed in the staffing requirements for the majority of supplementals that relate directly to supporting the community parks projects. They happen to be in the first page, but they actually do support the second page. So that would include the Parks and Trails and Regional Parks Operation Technician. So that's one position that was identified as being needed if we went ahead with all the community parks projects. The other is the procurement specialist. So while a lot of those projects have to be done by an external contractor, that requires us to do a procurement process. And procurement is one area similar to human resources where we find capacity is a constraint on us getting the work done. And so the procurement specialist and the parks operation tech are specifically to support, among other things, the community works projects. And also, I would just like to take this opportunity, if I may, to just clarify. It's in the report, and Ms. Wayner has reminded me that the supplemental detail is not posted online until the supplemental is approved by the board. So that's part of the communication considerations for the supplemental. So I understand that as a result of that, the public will see a general number, and there may be questions to the board about where that general number is coming from. And the response will be that the board will be digging into those details and subsequently approving the supplementals that they feel are worth approving. So,
thank you. Anything else, Director Nicholson? Okay. I've got Kuhn, Martman, and Salmon. Director Kuhn.
Yes, just a word of caution. As it was pointed out earlier, any new project we take on most likely involves hiring more staff. So there'll be more costs involved. And as we can see by the supplemental requests, we're going to face a bit of a problem there. And so that brings me back to the request yesterday of North Cowichan's idea of a regional project that was proposed. And that's why I was against that, because again, we would be getting involved with something where we hire more staff and there'll be more expenses, and then we face the end game again, and that is we'll have to start cutting. So anyway, I just want to issue a word of caution there.
Thank you, Director Kuhn. Director Martman and Salmon. Director McGonigal, did I just see your hand go up? No? Okay. Director Martman and Salmon. Ben, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. And I guess my first time last year. I don't count as a budget. I was sort of in awe. This year, I do appreciate this. I like seeing, sort of a shot over the bow, so to speak, of this is what is the potential numbers could look like, and then drilling down into the details. So it gives me a chance to know where I specifically want to drill down. So that's one, my view. The question I have is relating this back to item 1 on the agenda, about the slideshow and the schedules, because those, I gather, are being posted, and yet those schedules involving numbers at a high level from the supplementals. It's the first question.
Ms. Weiner, or I'm not sure who. Go ahead.
Ms. Weiner can answer.
Through the chair to Director Martman, what is posted on the website is only core budget. The supplementals are only left aside for the board to discuss or the committees at a later date. So the 2.4 number that was mentioned in number 1 by Ms. Bowen is all those numbers in detail are the one that gets posted to the website. Nothing about the supplementals goes in until it's approved by the committee or the board. And then there's a sort of a tab that gets added that says this is what's been added to the budget and what the impact is to requisition afterwards.
So as a follow-up, Chair?
Go ahead.
So my follow-up, and this is my concern, I'm not sure how it gets addressed, is that then there's nowhere but up for what's going to be seen by the public. It's going to be seen as core, and then it's going to be seen going up, no matter if we do even some supplementals. And so how do you avoid that perception of wow, they're just increasing? It's, someone once told me, you over promise and under deliver is a concern. So how do we avoid that, or is there a way to do that?
Through the chair to Director Martman, that would be reversing the whole process. That would start putting, and I think that would bring in the concern, that would be the assumption that all of the supplementals, everything would be approved, and it would be a 7% increase and have to work backwards. The way the budget process has gone for the last few years is we start with core, and yes, as you've mentioned, as the meetings go, it gets added to it, and there's additional numbers added at each point. However, that's why we have the public consultation meetings, and when we go out and have those meetings with the public, we start discussing those items. And then once again, we take all that information, including the public information, back to the board for 2-day deliberations where there can be further cuts.
And if you indulge me, Chair, one more question then.
Sure, go ahead.
So is there a need to post it now then, the core? Is the question to staff.
Through the chair to Director Martman, this is the budget book, and this is being transparent to the public as well as the board. Would be presented. This would be the same budget you would receive if we handed it out to you to start deliberations and considerations. So while it's not necessarily in an agenda item, we've put it in an easier aspect for the public to be able to have this and be part of those discussions.
See, part of the history here, Director Martman, before your time, we used to get a budget book, and it was a book. It was, God, I don't know how many pages. It was ridiculous. And, after the second meeting, we had made major amendments, and trying to track it all and do it all, we said, you know what, let's just do it electronically. And the decision of a previous board was to just post it online, and it's live there even during the meetings. I've seen times where finance staff have changed the material on the website just as the discussion goes on. Now, there may be a case to be made, I don't know, that we put that thing behind some kind of password protection and we don't show the public anything until we're ready to show it to them. But that kind of runs against the transparency piece. I don't know.
Thank you.
All right. Director Salmon. And then I've got Morrison again.
I think Ms. Mohan had her hand up.
Oh, I'm sorry, Ms. Mohan, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Further to Director Martman's comments, my opening comments are important. So this was a year where senior management basically sat at the table and looked at the supplementals, and we were faced with asset management, strategic priorities, And then also a number of items that were supplementals to restore services that were cut last year because of the budget mandate of last year. And there were actually very few supplementals that were increased service levels or nice to have projects. And so as we develop our asset management program, increasingly we want to be representing asset management to the public as core, not as supplemental. Likewise, strategic plan priorities should really be core, not supplemental. So we're still kind of in this development phase where we're transitioning to, as Mr. Boyson has outlined, an asset management program that's fully developed. We're kind of midstream. And further to Director Morrison's comments about how do you educate the public that asset management is actually, it's not really a nice to have, it's kind of a must have. And so as we change going forward, our feeling as senior management is that our strategy should be to be including those things as core in future years. I don't know that the next budget year is the year to do that, and a lot of it will depend on how our asset management program develops, but that would partially address the issue that you're talking about.
Okay, I've got Director Salmon, Morrison, and Kuhn. Director Salmon.
Thank you. So yeah, just follow up Director Nicholson's on the gas tax, but so is there a hard deadline by which these money has to be spent on the community works funds? I know there's been delays and we've got the storm damage to fix now, so my first question.
Ms. Weiner?
Through the chair to Director Salmon, there's not a hard deadline. We are reporting that we will have all the expenditures. I have to complete a form at June every year saying that all the funds will be expended. So by March 31st, 2024, all of the funds have to be expended on the form I'm signing right now. There is the opportunity. The program ends at March 31st, 2024. You never know what will happen. But right now, this is the first time ever that the municipality or the local government has had to sign off that they will expend all those funds by that deadline.
Can I follow up, please?
Sure, go ahead.
So, yeah, so I'm just concerned about the delays. I mean, I don't totally understand that. So the paragraph in the staff report talks about priority community works funding, 13 supplemental items. These are not all gas tax projects, right? These are other community works projects as well.
Sure.
Through the chair to Director Salmon, if you're looking at the projects on the back, if it has other funding, that's what's coming forward from community works funding.
Okay, I wasn't looking at that. I was looking just at the report itself when it talks about 13 supplemental items relating to community parks.
Ms. Weiner?
Through the chair to Director Salmon, if you look at Schedule B, yes, there's gas tax clearly identified, and those projects are all the ones that will be tied to the deadlines. Not all of the work is to be done in 2022. Some of it's to be done in 2023.
I see. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Director Salmon. Director Morrison, then Kuhn.
Thank you. And just to continue on sort of a bit of a theme that I've heard developing, and this is about managing expectations and sticker shock. So, I don't know if anybody else has noticed that there's been articles in different papers where different jurisdictions have come out with their preliminary draft budget, and that makes the papers. I think there's a jurisdiction on the island that was 17% was the number that came out. So I'm just going to relate as to what happened last year. Ms. Soldera thought that I was in pretty good shape with my budget, under 1% going into at this time last year. And then assessments hit, and I was at 11.5%, just because of the effects of assessment. And I did everything that I could do to get it down to 9.5. And when the budget was finally approved, all the comments about directors with their, snouts in the trough and what are they getting? And so I'm sitting here thinking about how we manage the expectation going forward. Now, that when this budget goes online, Robert Barron's going to be all over it and the numbers are going to come out. And right now I look pretty good, or my area looks pretty good. But when assessments hit and we start adding supplementals, it's not going to look so good. So I'm just trying to make sure that when this budget is published, that there's lots of disclaimers, provisos, whatever we do when we publish this, that says This is very, very draft, that there will be changes and there's going to be a big impact when new assessment numbers come out at the beginning of 2022. That's my concern, is how do we manage this messaging out to the public when there's going to be so much variation in what we're presenting to them in budget numbers? Thank you.
I've got Director Kuhn and Marsh.
Yes, I'd like to get back to what Director Martin said, and I think I can relate to what he's after. An alternate way of doing the budget could be that the supplemental requests would be automatically included in the budget. Never mind supplemental requests, the budget would be including everything, which would, on the face of it, would make staff look bad, because, I mean, anybody that would look at that would say, well, good, they want that much, and for what? But we would look better because we would start cutting back on it. And then we could claim, oh man, look at, this was what was proposed by staff, and this is what we cut back. And with this, the budget, the public will never see that. And I think that's what Director Martin was indicating, because then there would be a positive change. And this way, there's always a negative change, because the numbers never go down, they always go up. So anyway, I'm proposing that would be the right way of going, but on the face of it, you could argue that. You could say, well, okay, if staff want that much on supplemental requests, let's just put it all in the budget, prepare that budget, and then we'll start cutting back from it. Anyway, that's just an idea.
Ms. Mohan.
So I have a couple of comments here. The first is that I want to say I'm extremely proud of staff. It's been a hellish year. We've been incredibly understaffed. We had almost an impossible budget directive, given that last year we had a zero to recover from. And the fact that we can provide you with a budget with supplementals all in at under 7% is a small miracle. So I just want to put that out there, first of all. Staff are not ashamed of this budget. We are proud of it. So that's number one. The other thing is that the supplementals that you are receiving have nothing to do with a staff wish list. They have to do with following board direction on strategic priorities, board direction on asset management. So I take exception to the idea that we should be making staff the fall guy so that the elected officials can look better. We have to work together on this budget. I think so far we're in an excellent starting place. There is not a giant impact here the way some local government communities are experiencing following this COVID year. And so I would hope that we can work together in a spirit of cooperation to minimize any unnecessary impacts and educate the public that this is a reasonable increase that is proportional to the directive on the work plan that we're receiving from the board.
Ms. Mohan, just to be clear, and I don't want to defend Director Kuhn, but what he said was how the public would perceive it. I don't think anybody on this board perceives that, staff is over asking. Director Kuhn, just for clarification.
Yeah, I just wanted to dig into that as well. No, that wasn't supposed to be critique on staff. No, I know it's a very difficult task, and I know, and I've been preaching that ever since I joined the board. The decisions are always up to the board, and it is the board where the expenses start. And we have to be able to cut back, and we are not able to do that because I see it every time we give in to more demands, and we can't blame staff for that. So I'm fully aware of that. I just want to clear that out.
And just to be clear, those demands are not from staff. Those are often community expectations or board expectations that we set as part of our strategic priorities. I'm going to move on to Director Marsh.
Yeah, and I would add to that there are also responses. I mean, the REOC or ROEC, I get it mixed up. I'd say they were busier than they've ever been in this last year or two. And I'm trying to remember what I first wanted to say now. Oh, yes. In regards to expectations, I think that we could ask our chair, Chair Yanni DiNardo, to, did I say that right, Lori?
You did.
Yay. Finally. 10 years later, she gets it right. We could ask her to contact the local papers and explain the process. They're always looking for stories. And I think that she's our spokesperson. And I think that's how you head it out in the get it out ahead. Don't just wait for criticism. Give the facts up front. So do we need a motion for that, Lori, or can you just do that as chair?
Yeah, let her take the flak.
No,
she's a spokesperson.
Director Marsh, I don't want to load that on the chair. I think that's why we have comms people, and they can write a press release, and I don't think we need board direction for that. I mean, just generally speaking, we've started the process, and perhaps some messaging could go out from our comms department saying, you know what, the board in committee of the whole had its first look at the budget, and here's some of the preliminary numbers, and the discussions will continue in January, and there can be a quote in there from Lori. But, it's not a matter of her calling the papers. That's not how it works.
Well, actually, I have to blame my Aquarian astrology, I guess, but I don't necessarily believe that we do everything the way we've always done it. And, why I think having staff do it is a way of opening up for them getting blamed. I mean, this budget is based on what we've asked for, and I just.
No, I totally agree with that. I'm just going to the process of how the communication would go out. And Ms. Mohan, I guess I would ask you, would it be standard operating procedure at this point in the budget process to say the board meetings committee of the whole had its first look at the budget, and here's the numbers, and they're going to beat it up in January and figure it out? Do we do that?
Through the chair, I'm not 100% sure. I'd have to rely on Ms. Wayner about past practice for the budget, but it's certainly something that we could talk about if it was the board's direction.
All right, I've got Director Acton and Morrison. Oh, and Director Staples. I'm going to put Director Staples ahead because she hasn't spoken yet. Michelle, go ahead. Hello, Director Staples? You're trying to get your audio working.
I'm trying to get my audio working, yeah. So I feel like every year I say the same thing, because this entire model of governance of our society is structured on growth. And so because of that, we are in a situation every year where expenses, everything increases. And then we come back to the conversation every year, and that includes all of the, I talked about it last night, all the extraordinary changes that we're undergoing as societies, the things that we have to now bear as local governments that we didn't before. And so when we're looking at these budgets, it should really come as no surprise to any of us what we see in front of us. And while it's challenging for a number of reasons, I think that it's also like there has to be a certain level of realism that I've come to sort of recognize in local government. The system is not built to stay the same. It just can't be. It can't function that way. And so every year we're faced with this, and every year taxes increase, and every year expenses increase. They just released a food report this morning, 7% increase in food for next year they're anticipating. That's $80 per average family increase a month next year. That's just one area. And so, when we look at our budgets, our needs as communities are changing and growing as our responsibilities are. And I think that this needs to be something that sort of this discussion has to take place at a higher level than us, like a UBCM or something where we're all coming together and figuring out what are the ways that we can look at to change the system in the way that it works and restructure things, because this is not going to get any better. and it's never going to change. And wages and everything else in just average people's worlds are not keeping up to this. So we're always facing this, this push and shove, and the community perception that we're the ones that are responsible, when really it's the way the system is designed that's responsible for this. And so that's something that I hope, happens in my lifetime, because this is unsustainable. And it also puts so much pressure on individuals. And I think that what staff has presented is well thought out. It is what we need. And I would say it's probably the very basics of what we need. It's not everything that is actually required. So thank you for all your work on this. And it'll be an interesting process to see where we get to at the end of it.
Thank you, Director Staples. I'm going to put myself on the list too, because some of what the Mayor Duncan just said really resonates. I can recall when I was first elected, my very first new councillor school, the LGLA sessions that we hold up in Parksville at the end of, after every election. And we had a presentation from Jerry Berry. Most of you know who Jerry is, and it was a presentation on budgeting and on, and as a rookie, you kind of looking at this, and Jerry's trying to articulate how we as local government elected officials can defend and explain tax increases. And I got up to the microphone during the question period, as I want to do at these things, and I looked at him and I said, and I didn't know Jerry at that point, I said, why do you bureaucrats always assume that it has to be a tax increase? Why can't we work toward tax decreases? And that was my perspective at that point. But, Director Staples has pointed out that some of this is endemic, it's systemic, it's just, if that's the reason anybody gets elected is to reduce taxes, you're in the wrong game, because it just, in this day and age with inflation, with the increased demands, with all the rest of it, we're just not going to get there. So I just want to put that in there. Who have I got? Director Acton, I believe, is next, and then Morrison, and then Martman. Oh,
Thank you.
Okay.
Just 1 second, Chair. Can I just interrupt for a moment?
Yes, ma'am.
Can Allison mute, because we can hear her music class or dance class in the background.
All right. Okay, Director Acton, Morrison, Martman, Stone.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's really interesting. We have a lot of different conversations, or a lot of perceptions with the one conversation. So it's always interesting how everybody sees things differently, and it's really helpful. Although I feel like I need to clarify, or at least how I see it, some of the process. When we set that target of 0% or 3%, I, for myself, never expect that to be reached. It's a number that states when it's over that, then we have a discussion on, and we work together on the budget that exceeds that. By no means is it meant to be something that puts handcuffs on people, on people's ability to deliver a service or anything. So I just hear some of the conversation going around, that number as very restrictive. And for me, I see it as a benchmark, and as for staff, go ahead, go to this number. And if you need to exceed it, then let's have a conversation and talk about the budget and work together on it. So I just some of the, how different language kind of means different things. And for me, that's how I see this budget process. And by no means, the number where we land is where we land. And as long as our communities are receiving the services that they desire, and staff has the tools that they need in order to provide those outcomes, I'm happy.
Thank you, Director Acton. Morrison, Martman, Stone, and Wilson. Director Morrison.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Two things. The 0 is sure, it's a great target. I'm I think the of the published or about to be published information, my electoral area will have a reduced requisition as compared to last year. Last year, I think I only requisitioned $5,000 more than the year before. But this year I'm replacing playgrounds and I'm doing projects and I'm, you know, it's as per normal. But I got to this starting 2 years ago. This isn't a miracle of numbers that I happen to be in that position. As I started planning this 2 years ago, and that's how I can have a negative number as far as my requisition goes. But to the point that was brought up earlier, I would sincerely hope that when this budget is published and the Robert Barons of the world and maybe some of the folks from Discourse start asking questions about this draft budget, I'm hoping that it will be Ms. Weiner and Ms. Bowen that will be fielding the questions on this, because, you know, I have absolute confidence that they can answer a question about my electoral area or Lady Smith's contributions or whatever best on behalf of this board. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Morrison. I just saw a message pop up asking for a break. I've got 3 speakers left, and assuming that they're going to be quick, and I don't see a huge flurry of hands, maybe we can wrap up this agenda item, take a quick break, and then we'll get back to the report from the Parks Department. So, Martman, Stone, and Wilson. Director Martman.
Thank you, Chair. And just through the staff, I just have a couple of questions on the document itself. And first is probably an observation in that I see that under the column for parcel requisition that it's 1.6 million approximately dollars. And, you know, that's, to me, if you look at the combined total, it's pretty small. And so kudos on how you've done that. The question I have is under the ranking column. I can't make sense of it, and I'd be pleased if someone could inform me.
Somebody on staff want to explain the ranking column? Ms. Weiner? Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Ms. Weiner can answer. That's all right.
Through the chair.
There we go. Okay.
Through the chair to Director Martman, the ranking that's on there, when you are given the individual supplemental forms, I'm thinking you're looking at the ones that say 16, 15, 20. Those are all scores that are out of 30 that ranks based on, is it a strategic priority? Is there a plan, like an asset management plan? Is there a risk if this project does not proceed or the supplemental is not approved? So that is what those numbers are.
So to be clear, the higher they are, the more important they are?
Yes.
Okay. That answers your question, Director Martman? Thank you.
Thank you.
Director Stone, then Wilson to close.
Just a quick question on, you know, with the publishing process, obviously we're working from the 2020 assessment numbers right now, but when will those be updated to include the preliminary assessment for 2021? Or for 2022, sorry.
Ms. Weiner?
Through the chair to Director Stone, Finance will not receive those numbers until the beginning of January. At that point in time, we'll be going about updating all of those assessed values.
Okay, and then just a comment if I can, Mr. Chair.
Sure.
Just understanding that because the conversation about new growth and new construction has come into this and how it affects this assessment. So another reason that Lady Smith's had a disproportionate increase is because of the rapid growth over the last few years, right? So that's where that conversation becomes a little bit more accurate, is once we have the preliminary assessment updated, then we'll actually know how a lot of these shared costs apportion. And I feel for Director Morrison, because I know that him seeing the change in forestry valuations, knew he had to get really tight with his budget and still had to deal with nearly a 10% increase to his actual citizens of his community. Not to say that the forestry companies aren't important citizens, but with that shift in burden. And that's what I think we're going to see this year, especially, is those high growth areas are actually going to be on a regional level taking on a higher portion of costs. North Cowichan, Duncan, where there's been densification and rapid growth, those, you know, shared services are going to come even more onto those rapid growth areas. So I look forward to getting the numbers with the preliminary assessment, hopefully as early as possible in January, so that we can take a bite out of it that's based on some accuracy. Thanks.
Director Wilson to close.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Michelle has actually brought up a couple of good points that the whole model just doesn't work anymore, and that needs to change. And I think we had a bit of that conversation yesterday. The sooner that happens, the better. One of the things I think is driving the rises that we have is a lot of downloading to local government from the province and from the feds, and that's something that needs to be addressed as well within the new model. One question for maybe Ms. Mohan or perhaps Mr. Boyson is, have we ever looked at a lot of these new things which are coming in rather than taking on full-time new staff? Have we actually taken a look at the comparative costs of outsourcing some of this work so that it's not a permanent fixture then, and it's an as-needed type of thing? Once they've done the work, they're gone, as opposed to retaining everybody that was taken on. Have we ever looked at that kind of thing to see what the costs might be comparatively?
Ms. Mohan.
Thank you, through the chair to Mr. Wilson. Yes, the staffing conversation that we had about supporting the supplementals and the ongoing need included sort of a wide-ranging discussion about which positions would be best candidates for contracting out services. So there's some possibility in HR. We don't always find a good value proposition there, but there's definitely, we've done that in procurement. We've engaged an outside consultant to help us with procurement processes. So that's for sure. A lot of the projects, the capital projects, are done by consultants. And so if there's a staffing component, it's about managing multiple consultants or managing multiple contracts, right? So there is that. You will find some staffing requests in this budget related to the election, which are somewhat, one of them is sort of a temporary election hire. So definitely that is, especially in a recruiting environment that's difficult. We also appreciate the value of being able to make temporary hires through contracting out. So we do look at that possible solution closely. And then, yeah, over to Mr. Boyson if he has more to add.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Pardon me. I just wanted to add one piece to that too. Is this something just as in my interim role here is to have been talking with engineering about a different way of looking at procurement as we put that position in there for all these projects. The staff and engineering are one of the biggest barriers is being able to process through procurement, and it's the amount of work that department's doing is amazing how much they're pushing through, but it's one of our limiting factors. And so one of the options is that I've used in other experiences in local government is a standing offer process where you do have a set standing offer with consultants to be able to move that process forward when it comes to procurement and projects a little faster. It's an arrangement where you would end up having a contract with a standing offer to provide services for a period of 2 years or 4 years. And then you actually reduce that procurement steps significantly. It's still, and it's a process a lot of local governments are turning to. So that's something that we're looking at right now as a comparison for an option to be able to do that. It's not always guaranteed that it'll reduce provide cost savings, but I think there's an opportunity there for us to explore it because it would reduce, it would take the workload off of the procurement side of things, and also it's a bit of a time saver in terms of the overall processes. And you'd still do a full procurement process as part of that standing offer. You just would, instead of having to do procurement each and every time with a new process, that there could be some savings there that we're looking at right now.
Thank you, Mr. Boyson. It is 11:13. I think by consensus, we're going to take a 10-minute recess. Let's resume at 11:25, and we'll look at that report from the Parks Department. Some of us have to be done by, I think, 12:15, somebody said to me, so let's try to shoot toward that, okay? See you all in 10 minutes.
Video is live.
Thank you and welcome back to our special committee of the whole meeting. We have one more item on the agenda. That's R3, the report from the Parks and Trails Division regarding storm damage from the rain event we had in mid-November. The report was added to the agenda as a late addition, I think yesterday. I'm assuming the directors have had a chance to read it. I'm not sure if Mr. Farquhar wants to do a quick overview of the contents of the report just to set some context if folks are are listening in. Mr. Farquhar or Mr. Dias, you both signed off on the report. Just a quick review of what's in there, if you would.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd ask Mr. Dias if he's able to come up on the screen to provide that overview.
I'm sorry, who to come on there or what to come on the screen? I didn't hear it.
For Mr. Dias?
Oh, okay. Hi, Ryan. Welcome. Just a quick overview, if you would, of the implications of what we experienced last month.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just what's essentially outlined in the report is a summary of both the impacts to community and regional parks from the atmospheric river event. We've got, I think it was over 30 sites impacted. The range of which it was, sort of small washouts on community trail systems and down trees to complete rivers, or creeks rather, jumping banks and washing out 30 meter sections of trail. So for us, this is probably one of the largest impacts that we've seen. We tend to deal with, as climate is changing, we're dealing with events every year. However, this is probably the one that we've seen the most impact. Specifically, attention to the Cowichan Valley Trail, where use of the trail has been interrupted indefinitely because it's the middle of winter, and trying to fix these sections and bed culverts when water's flowing is pretty much not possible. The pictures attached sort of give an idea of what the impacts look like. And at this point, we are looking for some feedback on sort of next steps with regards to we've got to go out and gather more information to provide to you guys in terms of assessment and overall cost. But where those funds come from is sort of going to be the next direction that we will need from this committee.
I see in the report under financial considerations that the costs are still unknown pending completion of additional technical site assessment. Then you talk about using some reserve funds and also trying to get some funding from the province's disaster financial relief. And I also note that at the start of the report there's a 2-point recommended resolution, which I'll ask somebody to move later. But for now, I'll just turn it over to the committee and see if anybody has any further questions.
Your audio's gone a bit weird, Al. I don't know whether anybody else is having the same problem.
Everybody else having trouble hearing me too? Sorry.
I actually think it was Mr. Dias, his feed that was making background noise.
All right. So anyway, as I was saying, under the financial considerations, it's still unclear the full impact. There's some suggestions some of this can be paid for out of reserve funds and some application to the BC Financial Disaster Financial Assistance Program. There are a recommended resolution with 2 bullets in it at the start of that staff report. And I'd invite anybody to make a motion with respect to those recommended issues. I see that's already moved and seconded. For further discussion, does anybody have any questions for staff? Director Morrison to lead, and then Director Stone.
Yeah, just thank you, Mr. Chair, through you to staff, and these different programs have different rules, and some of them, if you've started, then you're disqualified. And do we have any notion as to whether or not we can get to work when weather permits, and whether or not the application for various programs can be done sort of in stream as we're bad pun, sorry, but as we're doing the work, or do we have to actually wait and get program funding approved before we can get work underway?
Mr. Chair, through you, Director Morrison, we can apply essentially right now for the funding and then perform the work at a later date that makes sense. We have utilized this fund in the past, and typically they give you up to about a calendar year to complete the work. So it's a very reasonable approach.
But I guess the question was, can we start the work, or would we start the work before we have confirmation of the funding? Is that even possible?
It's my understanding that you're, like an insurance claim, you're phoning and starting a file, and then you're allowed to start the work essentially. Yes.
Thank you. Director Morrison, supplementary.
Yeah, just a supplementary. What about our capacity? I know that we don't have a bunch of culverts and backhoes and stuff sitting around waiting for this kind of thing, and everybody else in the world is trying to fix the same sort of infrastructure. What are you looking at in the way of when weather permits, the ability to hit the ground running?
Mr. Chair, through you to Director Morrison, we have to wait for appropriate fish windows. So in-stream works is usually end of June till end of September. So right now we have the ability to, gather up all the soft cost information, do the hydrological assessment to make sure we size the culvert to the appropriate size. Geotech structure, any related costs. I think we would essentially be talking to an environmental consultant to say if we could proceed with the work when water levels are really extremely low. What would that mean? Could we do that and follow any sort of requirements around that? So worst case scenario is we're waiting till the fish window in June.
Thank you. Director Stone.
Actually, Director Morrison asked my question. It was more related to being able to start the work and expend it. If we spend funds from reserves, but then those claims are approved, essentially, we'd be able to replenish those reserves with those claim funds. Okay, thank you.
All right. Director Nicholson.
Thank you. I've got two questions. Speaking about reserves, are we thinking, our staff thinking about whether we have adequate reserve requirements for future atmospheric river events and so forth? Or should we be thinking about changing those?
Mr. Farquhar's popped up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, as Mr. Dias noted, this has been an extreme event in all the years I've been here in the regional district. We've never seen a storm event impact our park assets to the degree they have this time around. So certainly from a reserve funds perspective, it's something that staff are currently giving some thought to, and we'll definitely be coming back to the board later date with some suggestions, working with finance in terms of how we have sufficiency to deal with future weather events across our network of parks and trails, given the exposure that they have to things like these sort of extreme rain events.
All right. Director Nicholson.
Thank you. Yeah, so just to follow up on that, along those lines, I don't think that this is a historic event for sure, but I think it's going to become more common in the future. And so it also speaks to the issue of our asset management program and our design standards. And I'm wondering if in the asset management program, we are going through and looking at infrastructure that have high risk to this kind of thing, and that we should increase the design standards and look and build that into the asset management. Is that happening?
Mr. Chair, through Director Nicholson, absolutely. Certainly one of the things that we've been talking about as staff is just because there was a culvert in place prior to the big event in November, perhaps not putting a culvert back again is the right way to go. Maybe we need to look at an alternate approach, i.e. a clear span bridge, so that you have capacity for future weather events to not be blowing out culverts in future. So yes, we are factoring that into how we're looking at these events and the impacts on our parks and trails.
I see Mr. Boyson had popped up, but now he's gone. So, Ms. Mohan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I also wish to add that this particular event has caused a ripple through a number of divisions and departments in the organization, including emergency management and environmental the environmental division for a number of reasons related to accelerating plans around climate adaptation, because these events, this was an extraordinary event, and the indications are that we may have more and more frequent and sooner extraordinary events than we originally planned. The other thing that I wanted to share was just in response to the recent state of emergency and my participation on provincial coordination calls, there was sort of a resounding sentiment among lots of local governments around the disaster financial assistance and the fact that it sometimes is limited to replacing at the same level as what was destroyed, as opposed to replacing to a level that would account for future climate impacts. And so this is a topic of conversation at multiple levels of government, not just our own level of government. And we're certainly aware of it and participating and anticipating to look at all the different policies and practices of the organization in that lens.
Thank you very much, Mr. Boyson.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. I just was going to add that as part of the bigger picture asset management program is that risk and vulnerability is a part of that process. There's evaluating risk and prioritizing is all part of that program. So that is in there, and we can discuss that when we come to present on asset management. There's talking about other departments as well. I am having discussions with our environment department too about the flood management work as well and the impacts that have come from this as well. This is another impact, and we are contemplating a report to the board in the new year that would discuss this. We're just going through what that looks like. It's there's a discussion there, the range of impacts related to floodplains and some of the impacts about how we manage the floodplains. These things, we're just discussing that right now, and so contemplating that report to come to the board in the new year.
I'm hoping the Chemainus River floodplain is part of that discussion. Thank you. Not seeing any other hands. Maybe I missed. Oh, Director Wilson.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. One of the things that I have spoken to parks about it is the speed at which they reacted to some of the damage that was certainly done in the parks in my area. Very, very quick off the mark, and I'd like to just thank them here in public for doing that work. Thank you very much, guys.
Thank you, Director Wilson. So we have a motion on the table, and I'm going to read it into the record just for folks who are watching and perhaps haven't seen the updated agenda, that it be recommended to the board that application be made to the province of BC's Disaster Financial Assistance Program for funding to rebuild major washouts on 3 separate sections of the Cowichan Valley Trail between North Cowichan and the town of Lake Cowichan, and 2, that staff be directed to prepare 2022 budget supplementals for budget function 280 regional parks for funding consideration to undertake repairs of major washouts on 3 separate sections of the Cowichan Valley Trail between North Cowichan and the town of Lake Cowichan. That motion has been moved and seconded. Director McGonigal.
I think the impacts of this are far-reaching outside of the town of Lake Cowichan and North Cowichan. The amount of people that utilize those trails is significant, whether it be active transportation modes, electric bikes, walking, horseback. So the impacts are far-reaching throughout the whole regional district, and I'm hopeful that we can secure the funding to put this back to a better place than it was prior to this.
Thank you. I'm going to call the question on the motion that's before us. All in favor? And opposed? That carries. And that's it. I don't think there's much else on the agenda. Ms. Legault.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There's no requests to participate in question period, so it would be just on to adjournment.
Mr. Chair, Director Morrison
has his hand up.
Director Morrison.
Just a process question. Are we having any more board meetings before January 12th? So my question is this essentially what we just passed going to be sitting in limbo and we're waiting a month before they can make application, or can they be, directed to proceed, or how's that work?
It's an interesting question because the recommendation was that the committee recommend to the board. I don't know that the committee has the authority to authorize staff to go do something. I'd defer to Ms. Martineau on that. I know in North Cowichan we've amended our delegation of authority bylaw to allow committee of the whole to actually direct action, but I'm not sure if we have that here or not. Ms. Martineau.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The normal practice would be to wait until it's endorsed by the board. However, in certain low-risk, high-priority scenarios, we may take preliminary steps to advance a directive where required.
Director Morrison?
I would move that this be an unusual circumstance and we take preliminary steps to make this action happen.
That's seconded. All in favor? Good. You got your marching orders, staff. Thank you very much. There being no further business on the agenda, and since this is the last meeting before January, Merry Christmas, everybody. I declare this meeting adjourned at 11:41 a.m. Thank you.
Enjoy your Christmas.